Alright, so in this next Photoshop 101 video, we're going to go over the rectangle tool and the other shape tools that you have here on your left toolbar. The rectangle shape tool is pretty straightforward. U is the hotkey for those, for the shapes. I use the rectangle shape tool quite a bit, actually, to make designs for a lot of different things. Essentially, it allows you just to create different rectangles and squares and shapes like that with four sides. What we're going to do up here at the top bar, the standard, I'm not sure exactly what the standard is. I think it might just fill with your background and foreground colors. Right now I have it with this little red hash going through it. That is a transparent fill, so it's not going to fill the shape with anything. But let's say we want to fill the shape with black. And then stroke is going to be a border that is preset on the shape, and then you can set the pixel size to whatever you want. I typically don't make any shapes with stroke because there's an easier way to do that, a better way to do that. So we'll go ahead and click on the no color, so there's not going to be any stroke to it. It's not going to matter that that has 10 pixels at it. You don't have to set it to 0. You can if you want. It's not going to do anything. If you were to have a stroke, this little bar here, this with this drop down, will tell you what kind of stroke it will have. So it can have a solid line, a dashed line, or a dotted line. And then you can also set the types of corners that you want. So you can have rounded corners or beveled corners or just straight corners, and then different caps. So if you just did like a straight line across, it would be a rounded or straight, beveled, etc. And then you can set the width and the height if you wanted to of the shape here. These little sections here are not necessary. This is for like combining two shapes together or intersecting two shapes. I don't really use these a whole lot. Maybe the combined shapes. And then this is the alignment to align, different paths and stuff together. But again, it's not necessary. You've also got a little drop down here that says shape. If you click that drop down, you'll have path or pixels. If you want to create a shape, you're obviously going to leave it at shape. If you wanted to create a path, I'll go over paths in the next video, along with the path selection tool here. And explain to you what paths are and how you can use them. But for the purpose of this video, we're just going to go over shapes. So right now we've got a fill color of black, and just to create your shape, just simply click and drag, and you can create any size shape that you want. To the right of what you're dragging, it's going to tell you the dimensions of your shape. So mine's at 7 inches wide and 1.33 inches tall, so we'll just try and make that an even one. I don't think we'll make it there. So anyway, we'll just leave it there. So that just created a rectangle in that shape. So you've got your shape made. It's going to open up a dialog box over here on the side for the properties of that shape. You can then change the width and the height here manually. So say I wanted to set it to 1 inch, I can make it 1 inch. And it will do that. And if I wanted to set this to 7 inches, we can set it there. So you can manually enter in the dimensions you want for your shape over here. If you wanted to add a stroke to it, you could do that. So say we'll add a red stroke around the edge. You can see it added that little red stroke around there. If we wanted to change the color of the shape, we could change it to green. We can change any and modify any of those things even after the shape is made. We'll go ahead and eliminate the stroke and we'll set it back to black. I'll go ahead and minimize the properties there, and now we've created our shape. It's very, very straightforward. You can also modify the shape by clicking any of these exterior squares on the outside and dragging them whichever way you want. If you just drag it, it'll move it this way. If you go from a corner, you can go either direction. If you hold down shift while dragging, it will drag all the dimensions proportionately with each other, and it doesn't matter where you click it. You can click on the side, you can click in a corner. It doesn't matter. It will drag that proportionately to whatever the dimensions are. You can also, if you go on the outer edge, around it, you can see it's got that little twisted arrow. You can click and spin it. You change the angle of it. You can also change the angle from up here on the top bar. Right now it's at 3.67 degrees. We'll just set it back to 0 degrees and hit enter, and now our shape is back to what it was before. If we're happy with the shape, we can hit enter again, or we can click this little check bar up on the top, and it's created our shape for us. If you didn't want sharp solid edges where they meet each other, these inner circles here will allow you to click and drag them to give you rounded edges, so you can make your shape, you know, rounded. It's kind of cool for making like name tags or something like that. But yeah, they're not bad to do that. You know, it gives you a lot of freedom and control over what you can do to the shape. And then if you're happy with it, you can go ahead and just hit enter. And the next section in the shape tab here is going to be an ellipse tool, and exactly the same as the rectangle tool, except for it's going to create ellipses or circles. So you can just click and drag that however you want, and then it will create and generate that shape for you. You can then modify the width and the height and everything over here, again, the color and all that stuff. If you wanted to create a perfect circle, all you have to do is hold down shift when you drag, and it will create you a perfect circle. That's the easiest way to do that. And then those two I actually did on the same layer, so that now those are stuck together. If you wanted to change them, you would just hit Control Z. To undo that shape, you would click create new layer, go back to your shape tool, and then drag that in there. So now we've got a third shape here for us to mess around with. And then moving on to the other shapes, triangle, exact same thing. I'll hold down shift and just create a perfect little triangle there. And then polygons. With polygons, up here at the top, the only thing that's really different is you can pick the number of sides that you want up here at the top. So the default, I believe, is 6. You can change the number of sides to any number that you want, so it'll create that number of sides on that shape. So if we wanted to do like a 20-sided shape, we could do that, and we could just hit shift, and it will give us a shape that has, you know, 20 different sides. It looks a lot like a circle, but it's a little bit more hard edged. Each one of these little blue dots is another edge. The last little thing, or the second thing here, is you've got the line tool. A line tool is just simply that. It's just a line. So we'll create a new layer, and however you want to draw your line, it will make your line that way. So right now we've got our line set to there. It does not have a stroke on it. The stroke is important for lines, so we can create a stroke to it, so that way it's a 10-point line essentially. Otherwise it's going to be very thin. It's not going to be noticeable in anything. And then the last thing we have here is going to be the custom shape tool. When you click on custom shape tool, you get a little drop down menu here at the top bar for different shapes that are preset, that come with Photoshop. You can also download different shapes. I believe Brush Easy has some shapes on there, and there's some other websites that you might find that have Photoshop shapes. You can also create your own shapes out of any image that you want. These I don't use ever really for any reason, but they are there for you to use. So you can create like a tree, and that would just generate you a tree. All of those little blue dots are different points on that tree. So if you click off of it and you go like to the background layer or to a different one, you'll see that it, you know, generated you a tree in that shape. You can obviously modify and change the colors of any of these things. Very, very simple, very straightforward. We'll go ahead and delete all of them except for the rectangle, and then I'll show you another thing that you can do with these shapes. I'm going to bring the edges all the way out so it's a solid shape. With the rectangle layer selected, if you click on the outer edge and then you have it all highlighted and you right click in the middle, there's a lot of options that it gives you here. So you can free transform control, you can scale it, rotate it, skew, distort, change the perspective, or warp it. What all these things mean is just change the way the shape is. Right now you have a perfect rectangle, so say you wanted to skew it. When you click skew, it'll give you, when you go to the outer edges, instead of the rotate that it gave us before, it'll give you a way to shift it this way or this way to actually skew it. And then if you're happy with that, you can click enter or click that check mark up on top. Same kind of deal with distort. Distort will allow you to modify it in any direction you want, really. If you went to perspective, perspective is going to give you just different perspectives on things, similar to skew, but not the exact same. These tools here in this little section aren't used a whole lot. Certain designs that I have that I use these for would be like some of the beer cans and things like that that have defined sections that have slanted edges or things like that, but it's not super useful. It's just something that is part of the basics of Photoshop. And the last thing would be like warp. Warp, you can literally grab it from anywhere. It gives you kind of a square grid on it, and you can change and modify the shape completely. It's kind of a pointless thing in Photoshop. This isn't used really for anything that I've ever come across. I guess it's kind of fun to mess around with, but not really an important aspect of Photoshop. So I think that is all for the shapes section. The next section, I'm just going to go over these last like 4 or 5 things that are in the bottom because none of them are of really any importance, but I'll just explain to you exactly what they do very briefly, and then we'll jump into the layers panel and how to modify things using the layers panel.